Okay, so hi everyone, hola and kia ora from New Zealand. So what I want to focus on in this presentation is looking at going back to the textbooks, looking at textbooks, again, we are looking specifically at English language teaching textbooks, that global context. There are some issues that come out of the literature from it. So, for example, it's market-led. They are global products. The idea of sales-driven, because it's a lot of money. In fact, it's not $1 million industry; it's $1 billion industry. A lot of the ones who are involved in the textbook production, they have tight deadlines. And then, of course, I come to the great nationalism, parsnip. So the idea here is that in the context of these textbooks, you've got, what kind of English is being taught. Often you hear the dominance of British or American English, and to a lesser extent, you might see some Australian or New Zealand or some other, but the others just get a few examples. So another area of just the first one we're looking at is the role of the teacher. So I'm summarizing research. This one is from McGrath. And one of the things that he looked at was around materials analysis. So, looking at the cultural content. So teachers, when they're looking at things, they're looking at gender, ethnicity, minorities. So they're looking at, okay, what's in the textbooks? What parts are actually reflecting, my student cohort? Because obviously, depending where you're teaching, these things are important. The other aspect of this is materials adaptation. One of the ideas here from the literature was saying, okay, the third aspect is around supplementation. So this is where a number of teachers who are working, depending on the program and the context, you've got a textbook and you think, well, there's not really enough there. There are some aspects that are missing. So I need to supplement. I need to use other materials. And then the fourth aspect looking at is materials writing. This is a challenging one. So you've gone from just analyzing textbooks to then adapting a textbook to adding other information that goes along with the textbook. Now this is where you're completely writing your own. Now we're moving to the next one. I thought I'd begin with a quote around what linguistic imperialism is, because it's quite a grandiose title, isn't it? Linguistic imperialism. So around this cultural and linguistic imperialism, there's, first of all, again, these are the issues that have been, I'm just sort of summarizing some of the things in the literature. So there's the use of global Englishes and translanguaging to challenge native-orientated goal of English language teaching. So this is like almost an antidote to that it isn't just all about American and British English. There's international English. In fact, most people who teach English as a foreign language throughout the planet are actually not, English isn't their first language. Okay, so that's the majority. They're certainly not a minority, it's majority. So the idea is that promotion of a global English rather than just these kind of binary sort of American and British English. There's also global English views first languages and local cultures as resources rather than a hindrance to language learning and intercultural communication. So again, it's just changing the thinking around the use of global English and the resource that, of course, other languages are. So, and the final point on this one is, despite recent English language textbooks being published to target global English language learners, they've referenced to the inner circle, so I'm moving back to that inner circle of the kind of Anglosphere, countries and native speakers of English, including American England, still surpasses the outer expanding circle countries. So again, this is a criticism that it's still way too much focused on American England and not giving enough credence to. However, you might be thinking, okay, I've done all this, what seems quite a lot of negative things about textbook use. However, obviously there are still some benefits. And there are others, and some of you may think of some others as well, but still, they're a valuable resource for early career teachers. You know, you need something. If you just say, okay, you're a teacher now, just go teach. Well, what do I do? What are my resources? How do I do this? So everyone has to start somewhere. For some, they do provide structure to learning and teaching. So in that sense, it's quite good because you see the way you open up any textbook and the way it's sequenced, the content. You know, they have their kind of sort of map of the book where it tells you quite clearly, this is how it's focusing on this language point, this is the vocabulary, this is the listening exercise, this is the speaking exercise, this is the writing exercise. So they do provide structure. They are materials rich, so there's a lot there, because some of them, originally they used to have like photocopiable things, and then it was CD-ROMs, and then after a while CD-ROMs didn't work because no one uses them, and then eventually moving to kind of obviously online digital resources associated or websites. And also, I think I've got one too many L's in there. Supposed to be English language learners, should only be 2 L's, not 3. Anyway, so if you're an English language learner, if you don't have access to a teacher, a textbook is a really good start because not everyone has access to teachers. So depending on where you are, what language you're using, textbooks are still really helpful. So with our program, this is a little quick history thing. When first starting, obviously many years ago, of course it was very textbook heavy, textbooks by level. You got teacher books, teacher ones, and you're kind of using that and students are going through it and people are buying it. So it's very much textbook heavy. Part of the thing that's going to inform this is this critical pedagogy. So, I've got the references there to Pennycook, Norton, and Tui. So the idea of being transformative, the idea that, seeking change, foregrounds knowledge, challenges status quo, agency, participation, dialogic, and that key one, that locally situated and socially mediated. So the idea is these kind of concepts are informing what is happening. Now, before we move on to the next one, I have to explain this. This is Mataranga Māori. Now, this is part of our kind of indigenous aspect to the program. So the simple definition is just Māori knowledge, okay? I have an expanded version of this, which talks about, within this body of knowledge originating Māori ancestors, worldviews, values, perspectives, creativity, cultural practices, recognition of interrelated connectedness between all life forces and those seen and unseen with the human eye. So it's quite expansive. But the idea here is that this is a concept which is starting to be more integrated within programs throughout Lincoln University. So not just in actually EAP programs, but also within our degree programs. So it's kind of like embedding the content. Because the idea is it's a partnership between what we call the Crown and Māori. So therefore, and in this case, our local iwi Ngā Tahu, it is actually a partnership. So the curriculum, so these curriculum changes that we're looking at. So part of it is updating resources. So when you refresh, you've got to think, what resources do you need? What's suitable? So some of the earlier comments I meant around, where you're analyzing materials, you don't just, again, grab things. You analyze them. You decide. There'll be having to be some materials creation. So that's because some things don't fit. You need new resources. You've got to meet the needs of a diverse student cohort. So again, you've got to tailor what you do to who you're getting. And that changes from year to year. So, under COVID, obviously just turn the tap off. Now, it's, numbers are increasing again. And of course, who comes changes, so therefore it's different. You reflect the gender diversity within your cohort because, again, there are changes there. And of course, there is looking to incorporate Mataranga Māori. So that's, I had to explain that concept, otherwise, you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. So these are some of the things that we're looking to change. Now, okay, so as I'm coming to this sort of final phase, I thought, well, bringing back, I've just given you some local context where we're making changes at Lincoln. I've mentioned about the context of textbook use. There are a lot of criticisms of them. Obviously, there are some benefits. Now I was thinking, okay, what about some effective use of them? So I thought I'd a little bit more positive finish. So part of it is, be aware that, the design of textbooks are economic, ideological, and political constructs. So it's just having an awareness of this. Be critical as English language learners. So for those, anyone, because it's not just about teachers, there's the learners as well, in adapting and in analysing textbook content. So, it's not everything is there. You do need to adapt. You do need to analyse it. Be proactive in your choice of textbooks that provide pedagogically sound materials balanced by engaging content. So again, the teaching focus, is it sound? And is it engaging? And that's that whole thing around supplementation and creating other resources, because some textbooks are just dull, let's be honest. And some of you know what I mean. They are just dull. They're not that interesting. So nobody wants to learn dull content. It's a turn-off. So you want to be able to enjoy your content and want to learn. Be encouraged as you supplement textbook content with local content that builds and enhances on your values and what you teach. So don't be afraid to bring in your local context. Just because this is this internationalized textbook, again, some institutions, you have to use things. But if you want your content, bring it in and localize it. And that final point is, be advocates of reflecting local content that are close to English language learners' reality. So you need to bring what you do to the learner, not the other way around. Okay, I've got lots and lots of references here. So that's it. So I welcome questions.